control. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us all to take some much needed time to think about ourselves this morning. I welcome Dr. Jim Harris. He is the Associate Director at the West Virginia Autism Training Center at Marshall University. Jim's focus at the West Virginia Autism Training Center is the improvement and expansion of services ranging for in-home programs to national partnerships. Jim has presented at a variety of conferences from the local to international levels on such topics as behavioral intervention, parenting, positive behavior support, trauma-informed care, organizational change, and many more. He has worked with children and families throughout his career as an early interventionist, parent educator, educational consultant, and behavioral health therapist. He has worked with a variety of public and private entities, including the Fred Rogers Company, the United States Department of Education, the United States Department of Justice, and many more. You can find more information about the West Virginia Autism Training Center on Marshall University's website. Although we can't see each other this morning, please help me in welcoming Dr. Jim Harris this morning as he takes over the mic and video. All yours, Jim. Hang on a second. Jim, we can't hear you. Hang on a second. It should pop something in your box, Jim. It's saying.
You got me now?
Got you now.
All right. How about that? We went ahead and got the problem out of the way early. I like that. All right. So can you see my the Melody, can you see the slide by itself view right now?
Exactly. I can see the slide by itself.
Okay. And if anything happens that's not supposed to happen, you just interrupt me. Okay.
Something's happening that's not supposed to happen.
Gotcha. All right. Let's roll.
Hang on. Something's happening that's not supposed to happen.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yep. It should be sharing your screen right now. Hang on 1 second.
Mine says you are screen sharing.
Are you seeing it? I'm only seeing Barb's right now.
No, I can. It says you are screen sharing is what mine says.
Okay, looks good to them, Jim. You're good to go.
Okay, I'll pull it back up. All right. Well, good morning, Melody. Thanks so much. That was a lot of stuff you covered quickly. That was fantastic. That was well done. I tell you, I was thrilled. Melody sent me a text and said, "Hey, we're gonna do a webinar series, and are you up for it?" And I said, "Absolutely, I'm in. Let's go." So I'm excited to be a part of this. I'm excited to sharing content's one of my favorite things. My most favorite thing is to be with people in a place sharing content, but obviously we know with the circumstances being as they are, that's not possible right now. So I'm excited to get some version of normal or something that really energizes me and helps me feel a little bit of normal and a little bit of energy. So I'm excited to talk to you today about stress and self-care. Really appreciate, I'll tell you, the whole slate of webinars that are coming up with this series looks fantastic. I'm honored to be kind of kicking this series off. So this is a topic to me that I really get excited to talk about, understanding stress and self-care, just because of the personal connection that it has with everybody, regardless of your professional or personal situation or circumstances. This is very, very relevant. Now, before I go too far in, I want to take a quick second and give you a sense of kind of who I am, where I come from a professional standpoint as it stands today. I am, as Melody mentioned, the Associate Director of the Autism Training Center. We at the Autism Training Center are a statewide agency. We provide services statewide. We have 3 separate departments. That is the easiest way to understand what we do. The one department, which is our oldest department, which started in 1984, is our autism specific, what we call our direct services program. This is our program that does autism specific education for communities. We work with families, we work with educators, all that work is focused on autism specific information. And Andrew Nelson, Dr. Andrew Nelson is the director of our direct services. Then we have our college program at Marshall University. We have, this coming fall, we will have just under 60 students at Marshall University that are degree-seeking students with a clinical diagnosis of autism who are attending Marshall and receiving our supports related to their clinical diagnosis with things. But one of the things we're really proud of is we give these individuals an opportunity to show the world what they're capable of by attending Marshall University and be degree-seeking students as their peers. And it's a really amazing opportunity, really amazing program. Today, I'm representing our third department, which is our Behavior and Mental Health Technical Assistance Center. Our Behavior and Mental Health Technical Assistance Center is going to get ready to celebrate our 2-year anniversary. The director of the Behavior and Mental Health Technical Assistance Center is Amy Kelly. It is made possible through a grant, a collection of grants we have from the West Virginia Department of Education's Office of Special Education and Student Support. Our Behavior and Mental Health Technical Assistance Center has 3 core projects underneath that umbrella, which is our West Virginia Early Childhood Behavior Support Project, which is headed up by Dr. Amy Carlson, our West Virginia Positive Behavior Support Project, which is headed up by Alicia Zeman, and our Mental Health First Aid Project, which is headed up by Diana Bailey Miller. So really, really excited about that collaboration with the Department of Ed, and hope some of you guys already know who we are, but wanted to take an opportunity to kind of share with you who the Autism Training Center is, and more specifically, who the Behavior and Mental Health Technical Assistance Center is. We provide a lot of supports, and if you have any questions, the websites will be at the end. You can reach out to us. So here's the first place we have to start. In the spirit of blatant honesty, is this disclaimer. The presenter of this content is a profoundly flawed human being that struggles daily with stress and self-care. So here's the thing about when I'm talking about stress and self-care. Anybody that acts like they have this stuff figured out, anybody that acts like they're a master of stress and a master of self-care will lie about other things too, because everybody struggles with this stuff. So just because I'm sharing with you this content does not mean that I am an absolute self-care ninja every day. There are days when I'm better. There are days when I struggle. So I want you to know that when I'm talking through this content, it's not about kind of compiling guilt on what you feel like you are or are not doing that we're talking about. It's about finding places where you can increase your effectiveness, increase your understanding, improve your self-care, and a lot of times too, have some compassion for yourself. So I want to have this disclaimer so everybody kind of knows that I'm by no means speaking from a mountaintop. I'm right here with you in my day-to-day struggles and figuring out how all this stuff works. So where we have to start is I'm going to talk about defining what stress is, talk about what trauma is. I'm not going to talk extensively about these things. I just want to kind of give people an understanding, because here's one of the problems you run into with stress. Is people talk about stress as this amorphous like blob of something that's hard to quantify or focus on, and that makes it very difficult to address. So what I want folks to better understand is, what is stress? Because it presents in a variety of ways on a continuum of effect. So when we start talking about stress, this is the definition I prefer to use. And this is a combination of actually Medina's work and Robert Sapolsky's work. Probably one of the best, or I guess I would say like national treasure when it comes to understanding stress, is Robert Sapolsky. Robert Sapolsky is out of Stanford and has written a number of books on stress and how it affects the body and how it affects the mind. Medina's book is also very good. So those are great places to get information. Sapolsky talks about stress as anything that disrupts homeostasis. Now, and you know, back to freshman biology, what homeostasis is this period of being level or being balanced. And what stressors are anything that disrupts that balance. Now, I didn't say good or bad stressors. I just said stressors, because there are good stressors and there are bad stressors. So what I'll just mean is something that disrupts homeostasis. Now, if we get a little bit further into the elements of negative stress, we can start to unpack some of these ideas. Now, one of the things that's important to understand when you start talking about psychological concepts, coming up with a list of 4 of these, 5 of those, one sentence definition is always going to be limited because the physiology, the neurology is so complicated. We create bullets the same way we create symptoms in order to give us some sense of a way of organizing thought, but understanding that something like stress has multiple facets. So I'm going to break apart some sections of it. So if we think about stress on 3 key planes, negative stress on 3 key planes, 1 is, does it cause a physiological response? 2, is it perceived as aversive? 3, does the person feel a sense of control? So I'm going to give you a few examples, and some of you may have heard me talk about this before, but this is the easiest way to teach it. So number 1, let's think of a treadmill. So a treadmill causes a physiological response. That's kind of the whole point of a treadmill. Can it be perceived as aversive? Absolutely. That's why we like hang our clothes on it, right? And we try to hide it from ourselves. So that way we can talk ourselves out of getting on it because we'd have to move all our dress shirts. But last, does the person have control? Absolutely. You have 100% control on whether you get on it. You have 100% control over how fast it goes. So that is the elements of negative stress for a treadmill are low. Now let's think about a roller coaster. A roller coaster, does it cause a physiological response? Absolutely. Can it be perceived as aversive? Absolutely. Do you have control? Now, that's a trick question because you do have control over whether you get on it. Now, that's what we like about roller coasters. That's what they call thrill seeking. Oftentimes what thrill seeking is when we give away an element of control in order to trigger a physiological or psychological response. So what you do when you get on that roller coaster, and what you're saying from a control standpoint, when you get on that roller coaster and you look up, you're saying, yes, well-tattooed gentleman, I trust you for the next 3 minutes of my life to keep me safe. So there is that element of physiological and aversive, but there's also the element of control that we give away. Now, let's think of abuse. A child who's in an abusive home. Physiological response, absolutely. Aversive, absolutely. Control, very low. So what makes a negative stressor so powerful oftentimes is the either real control or perception of control. See, that's the thing, that it's not always whether the person does or doesn't have control necessarily. It's how do they perceive their level of control. And I think that's what, one of these ideas, like when you talk about domestic violence, a lot of times people go, why don't they just leave? Man, that is such a simple answer to a very complicated psychological and physiological issue, but it's the perception of control. It's the perception of outcome. So as we're talking about these things, you're going to hear me really dig into this concept of control. Now, here's my challenge as I talk about things today is I don't want to just make this a COVID-19 talk. I've got to balance between what science is science and what science is circumstantial as it relates to COVID-19. But let's unpack COVID-19 in those 3 areas. Does COVID-19 cause a physiological response? Yes, even in an anticipatory psychological way, it can trigger the stress response. Can it be perceived as aversive? Absolutely. If anything that you perceive that could kill you is perceived as aversive. Do you have control? And that's also why this whole COVID-19 thing is having such an impact on us, because the average citizen has very little overall control over this. And now what starts to happen, as you self-quarantine or as your stay-at-home orders and things like that, our control and our autonomy then becomes limited, so that we have control over whether we're exposed. But now you're going to start to see, as things reopen, the anxiety will change. It won't be it'll just be different, because we'll have control over the fact that we can leave our homes, but we don't have control over the person beside us or the person that coughs at the grocery store. So this is a legit stressor, and it's a legit negative stressor, and it's going to have it does and has and will continue to have an impact on our homeostasis. And the problem with it, and I'll talk a little bit later, is it has a trauma effect. It can have a trauma effect, and it can have a toxic stress effect. So let's unpack those 2 ideas real quickly. What is trauma? Well, here's a fancy definition of what is trauma. Trauma is an exceptional experience that is powerful and dangerous events that overwhelms a person's capacity to cope. Now, I'll even summarize trauma even more than that. I often refer to trauma as any experience that is an extreme negative disruption of an expected pattern. Okay, so think of it this way: you're driving down a road. Okay, let's say it's a road you feel comfortable because it's an expected pattern. Your brain knows how to deal with this road. So when we think about trauma, your brain has a road that it knows. It has your past, which told you what life has been like, and then it has observations and predictions about what life is going to be like. So what trauma is oftentimes is it's driving down your known psychological road, and it is a violent, I would say a violent disruption on that road. So it's almost like that car wreck into like a tree that then throws you to a new reality. Let me give you a specific example. It was a young lady, I think she was about 14, and I was asked to come to her home when her father completed suicide. And I was asked to be there when we told her that her father had completed suicide. And I remember sitting in that living room thinking, this is trauma. Because think about it. In her mind, she had an expected pattern for her life, most of which was based off of her history, which is, my dad's been here, he takes me to school, we go on vacation, these kinds of things. I know this road. And as she looks forward at 14 even, she can look forward and say, even the future, my dad's going to be here for things like proms and things like babies being born and things like marriages. Why? Because I've seen it around. I've observed that. So I expect that in the future. But in that moment when she's told her father had completed suicide, she was now had a violent collision with a new reality that now threw her on a whole different road, a scary road that she doesn't know how to live in a world where her dad doesn't live. She doesn't know how to drive down that road. So oftentimes what makes trauma so disruptive from a neurological and psychological standpoint is the difference between the expected pattern and the new pattern that the trauma now creates. So what does treatment look like for people that have experienced trauma is how do we now help that person successfully navigate their new reality? So treatment for this young lady is, how do we help you now live in a world where bad things happen and your father will never be in the world again? And that's what treatment then starts to work on. Now, can COVID-19 be traumatic? Yes, it is an extreme deviation from an expected pattern. We have to be careful, though, because stress exists on a continuum, and trauma being at the extreme side of the continuum, that this doesn't affect all people equally, not socially, not economically, and not psychologically. So there are some people that COVID-19 has been damagingly traumatic. People that have lost their job, people that have lost their homes or been in environments that are dangerous, and so on and so forth. And then there's other people where it's been a deviation from an expected pattern, but it hasn't been the violent collision that it's been for other people. Now, the other side of that is what we call, and Bruce Perry calls it big T and little t. Big T being trauma, little t being toxic stress. So this is the definition of trauma or toxic stress. The biggest thing to understand about toxic stress is the one line where it says, with failure of the body to fully recover. So what toxic stress does, it's not that collision and huge shift, it's that constant burden that a stressor provides that continually doesn't allow you to return to a homeostasis. So it's that day in, day out where you just can't quite get your feet underneath you. You just can't quite recover. And what that does is the body, anybody knows anything about like weight training or physical training, the way you do physical training is you stress the body with whatever exercise or whatever it might be, then you feed the body, and then you rest. And while the body rests, it repairs itself from whatever it was that the stressor, that weightlifting, running, whatever, it prepares the body to engage that kind of stressor in the future. But if you only stress the body, and don't feed and rest, then what happens is the body starts to break down. The same thing happens with toxic stress. If all you get is stress, then what happens is the body starts to break down. Its resiliency, its ability to be resilient starts to decrease. So that's why for some folks, maybe COVID-19 hasn't been traumatic in the extreme psychological and physiological sense, but it has been a source of toxic stress because you can't quite seem to get that homeostasis back. So it's just important that when people talk about how the pandemic has affected people, is it has affected all kinds of people differently. And one of the things we've also learned from studying post-traumatic stress and how it presents in some people and not others is there is genetic components, and there's things that relate to how your body responds to stress. You know, they would show where a group of soldiers would go into a combat situation. And, you know, let's say you have 100 soldiers, and this is just made up statistics, and you come out and 10 or 15 of them end up with post-traumatic stress symptoms, but they were all exposed to the same event. But it's the subtle differences from life experiences, genetics, things like that, that determine whether they manifest a full-blown mental health condition as a result of that. So it's a simplification, but understanding that, look at what big T is and look at what little t is. Now, this is what is referred to commonly, or when we talk about fight or flight, or the stress response, or the generalized stress response. This is what it's for, right? It's for this moment where a stressor presents itself. You go to action, you remove yourself or escape from the stressor, and then you return to homeostasis. So, and I always look at this picture and think, who took this picture? Like, clearly not a good friend, right? I can see it now, like somebody was hiding behind a bush, like, run, Carl, run, right? But the problem is, if you can't see this picture in detail, it's actually not, he's not hunting the bear. The bear has a tranquilizer dart in its back. It has a radio collar on. And so that gun is not a hunting gun. It's a tranquilizer gun. So this is a conservation effort that clearly the bear isn't in on. So, but the best, when you think about what the generalized response, stress response is and how it works, is his body, your body at any point in time is differentiating between two things: here and now and preparing for the future. So you only have 100% energy. So at any point in time, your body's trying to figure out, all right, how much energy goes to here and now? How much energy goes to preparing for the future? Here and now things are going to be like focus, are going to be like, triggering adrenaline, things like that. Future is going to be things like sleep, digestion, immune functioning, reproductive functioning, these kinds of things. Those are all things that are about tomorrow, right? If I sleep, I'm preparing for tomorrow. If I'm digesting, I'm preparing for tomorrow. If I'm working on reproductive, sperm count, ovulation, things like that, preparing for tomorrow. So in this picture, what we can think about is, what percentage of his physiology is focused on right here, right now? Now, I would argue that, let's say 98% of his physiology is focused on right here, right now. Maybe there's like 2% of his physiology and neurology that's focused on, did I leave the iron plugged in, hypothetically, if he's neurotic. But most of his body's right here, right now. And that's going to be at the expense of future him. So his body is so focused on taking care of right now him that it's at the future, it's at the expense of future him. So what that means is there's energy that gets pulled from things like digestive functioning and reproductive functioning and long-term learning. So if you stay in a state of stress, a consistent state of stress, what that does is it affects your ability to prepare for the future. You're not going to sleep as well. You're not going to digest nutrients as well. Your reproductive function is going to be disrupted. Things like that. So what this pandemic can do is, or what stress in general can do, is wear you down. And then what happens is, that's when you start to feel like, man, I just feel blah, or I feel depressed, or whatever it might be. It's that consistent running from the bear, so to speak. And I'm not going to go too much into this because I want to get into some strategies too. I did want to show this. This is from the ACEs work. And one of the cool things about the ACEs work is it has shed, I always want to be cautious that people, sometimes we overstate ACEs. ACEs are not the end all be all, beginning and end of understanding trauma. They are the product of some research that came out of the late 90s that gave us unbelievable insight into long-term impact of adverse childhood experiences. But we need to be cautious that we don't say, well, we've had trauma training because we've learned ACEs. Trauma presents in a variety of ways with a variety of outcomes. So I want you to think about that's important. But here's the thing that I love about the model, though. As you have an adverse childhood experience, but let's replace that with long-term toxic stress or trauma. What that does is it takes away from the preparation for the future, which disrupts neural development. And if that happens on long term, then it causes social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, which then increases your likelihood of adopting health-risk behavior, so on and so forth. So what happens right now is as we experience high levels of stress, it disrupts our body's ability to repair and prepare for the future. So that's why you're going to have some of these impacts, not just for kids, but also for adults. So the brain's a pattern-seeking device. Now, how does that factor into understanding stress? One of the ways that your brain mediates stress is to study and predict patterns. So the example I like to use is you've got a 2-year-old sitting in a high chair. They've got their sippy cup. They take their sippy cup, they drop it off the counter, and they look at you, right? What do? You come over, you pick the sippy cup up, you put it back on their counter, on their chair. You go back. If your kid's worth their salt, they wait till you sit down. You take a bite of food. They take the sippy cup, they drop it again, and they look at you, right? You come back, you pick up the sippy cup, you put it back on the counter. What's that? It's pattern testing. A plus B equals C. They're testing the pattern of the falling sippy cup, because if they understand A plus B equals C, they can and if that happens consistently enough, they can put that to sleep or put that to bed, so to speak, neurologically, psychologically, cognitively, and say, I know what happens when this happens. So when it happens, they're not nervous. They're not anxious. What's anxiety? Anxiety is fear of the unknown. So I don't know. What if? So when the cup drops, the what if is very small, which means the brain doesn't have to worry about what if in that situation and can focus on other things like exploring and learning and connecting and those kinds of things. So consistent and predictable patterns, and that's your brain's job, is to keep you alive. The main way it keeps you alive is by identifying patterns and preparing you psychologically and physiologically for what might come after A plus B. So I think that's a really important thing to understand. Now, in everything, I don't care if it's studying primary colors or quantum physics, it's all pattern recognition. An academic journal, what's that? It's a book where people publish the stories of patterns they've studied and if the patterns are consistent or not, and what variables affect the patterns. So when we start looking at this, what has COVID done? It's disrupted our patterns. What has it done? It's taken the certainty out of our existence. We don't know what to prepare for. We don't know if there's going to be a second wave. We don't know if we're going back to school. We don't know what August is going to look like. We don't know what September is going to look like. We don't know what June's going to look like. So what this has done is it's taken some of that pattern recognition away from us. And then here's another side of it. As things reopen, why this also creates anxiety, then you're going to go to a restaurant that you've always gone to, and everybody's going to be sitting outside, and you're not going to be able to go inside, which is weird. Your brain's like, I don't know this. I don't know what to do with this. I'm not certain what this pattern creates. So that's where that anxiety comes from, is it disrupts our pattern recognition. So what happens then is it creates this anxiety, this uncertainty. And the way I explain how powerful this can be is on your overall ability to focus and to be able to have homeostasis. Is imagine if you go to like Enterprise and you go to rent a car, and they come out and they say, hey, we got a car for you, great car, super sharp, take a look at it right there. But one small thing to think about, every so often, this hasn't happened but like a few times, as we've had people complain about a little bit, but rarely has ever happened. Sometimes when you go to brake, it doesn't catch the first time. So just hit it a couple more times and it'll catch, and you'll be fine. You'll be safe. Let's say by whatever stroke of poor judgment in a moment, you decide, all right, I'll go ahead and take this car. You take the car. First thing you're going to start doing is brake checking. Why? Because it might happen. Maybe. So when pattern recognition gets disrupted for us, it creates this floating anxiety, which affects our ability to focus. What's unique about human beings is we have the ability, and this is one of my favorite quotes, my life has been full of terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened. So what does that mean? Humans are unique in the fact that we can prepare and obsess over what if. We can obsess over what might happen. We can think about, we can rehearse. Our prefrontal cortex, the PFC, which is in the front of our brain, the most evolved part of our neurology, doesn't finish developing until somewhere in your 20s based upon what we know right now. It's the part of your brain when you lay down at night that goes, what if this, and what if that, and what if this? Now, in general, that's a very useful part of the brain, because what it can say to me is if I was to get up and try to jump my chair, my brain would say, we ran the simulation of that, don't do it. There's a great philosopher that used to say, thinking is great because your thoughts can die so you don't have to. And it's because we can rehearse. But it's also very powerful in the fact that we can create the bear when the bear's not there. I hope that's clear. We can imagine the bear. We can create and imagine that. And that's where that PFC kind of flies in. That's also why people really like mood altering substances. And here's just without going too far down this road. Alcohol, for example. Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. Now, what that means is it depresses neurological activity. The first place alcohol starts, well, it does global, but it affects specifically or significantly the prefrontal cortex. So what it does, best way to think about it, when a person gets a certain amount of alcohol, the bears go away. They don't really go away. The bear goes away in the individual's brain. So that's why alcohol, that's why Xanax or benzos works, is because it depresses the neurology, which then decreases or removes the bear, so to speak, from the neurology. So just a quick aside and why happy hour works, I guess. So what is learned helplessness and how this factors in, and then we're going to get into strategies. Learned helplessness is this place, and Martin Seligman is the father of positive psychology, but was also the founder of learned helplessness and as a theoretical concept in psychology. And basically what learned helplessness is a psychological and physiological state where the individual or animal no longer believes their behavior matters. So if you're in learned helplessness, what that means is you no longer believe that your effort equals outcome. So you stop trying. Most dangerous psychological condition a human being can enter into is learned helplessness. Why? Because they no longer exert effort, because they don't believe effort equals outcome. So when we're here, when we're like, what's the point? Get the Cheetos, shut her down. That's where it gets very, very dangerous from a psychological standpoint. So what are we going to do about it? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about, how do you know when you're stressed? And I'm not going to go too far into this, but I do think this is important. When I used to be in private practice and also worked in community-based mental health. And when people would talk about, I'm stressed, first thing we'd talk about is, how do you know that? Like, how do you know you're stressed? Is it in your body? Can you tell by your mood? Things like that. So it's important that when you say I'm stressed, a good clinician, or if you're your own clinician sometimes, is to say, but how do I know that? Like, what things? Because here's why. Because as you start, it's like predictive hints. As you understand, how do you know when you're stressed? Then you start working back from, when I'm really stressed, I feel this way. And then you go, what about when I'm a little less stressed than that? And what about when I'm a little less stressed than that? And if you get really good at it, what starts to happen is you can identify early indications of stress for you and intervene at that point. So you intervene on the front end, that you get the bear as a cub and not as a full-grown bear when it's coming at you. So that's one of the first things I would suggest to people is stop just saying I'm stressed, or if you say you're stressed, say why and how do I know that, and then start reverse engineering about what things give you those hints. For me, I get it in my shoulders and in my neck. Also, I notice I'll get irritable about people asking for things, or I get irritable about requests. I get real irritable in general. So I can tell those are big things for me. And I also will sugar seek. That's another big thing for me. So knowing what your buttons are, this is another thing that I talk about to people is, what are the things that stress you out? And the important thing in understanding what your buttons are is in getting rid of the things that don't matter. An example I use a lot of times is things like, one of my pet peeves that I had to get over was people refilling the Brita, right? It was exhausting, the amount of emotional energy I was feeling being irritated by people not refilling a Brita, which is ridiculous. You know what I've just decided? I am not the Brita police. My job if I see that it's empty, I'll fill it up and consider that my contribution to society. Because the big part of stress management or self-care and stress management is the first step is how do I know I'm stressed? The second step is separating between what I can and can't control. Okay, that's back, not to be religious, but to a very, very wise statement is the serenity prayer, or even this idea of controlling the controllables, differentiating between what I can and what I can't control. Because what I should do therapy with folks, I would say, all right, let's make a list, a T-chart, what you can control, what you can't control. And what I would do is people would list this whole big list of things they can't control and the things they can control. And I would say, how much energy are you spending on the can't control column? And what was common, not always, but common, was that people would spend an absorbent amount of energy on things they couldn't control, which was highly inefficient for their psychology and physiology. So that's a real useful idea of how do you separate those things. And things like consuming news constantly and things like that can make that more prevalent for an individual. And moving past this idea of admiring our problems, look how bad it is, look how awful it is, managing how much we're admiring problems and how much we're solving problems. So not admiring other people's problems, not wallowing, so to speak, it's an Appalachian term, right? Everybody's problems, but not say, what am I doing about my stress? So that's a big part of that. Now, we're going to pick up the pace here, because here's one of the things that I think, and not to be dismissive, but I feel like some of the conversation around stress and self-care is very light and very, elementary to a degree. And I don't mean to sound however that sounds, but it's more than walks and warm baths. Everybody's like, well, you need to take a walk. Well, you need to take a bath. Those kinds of things. Well, even more than that, I would say, or, use a fidget. Those things are relevant. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not that I'm saying those are bad. But what I'm saying is understanding why you take a walk, understanding why you take warm baths, or whatever that might be. And we're not going to go into it, but the two parts of stress and understanding how to get serious about self-care and stress is the first part. We're going to look at energy management strategies, and then we're going to look at resiliency development strategies. So energy management strategies are going to be those things that help to recharge our batteries, help us to put more gas in the tank. And resiliency development strategies are going to be able to make us have a bigger tank to deal with more adversity. And we'll unpack both of those. So energy management is, you've got this gas tank, and it is, as stressors disrupt you, what do you do to then get that energy back? So when we're looking at that, it's called regulatory fatigue. Stuart Shanker has a great book called Self-Reg that's written for kids, but I think it applies to adults as well. So the first thing we start with in regulatory fatigue is back to the old addictions work, which is the HALT work, which is hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And I had a second L in there, especially for parents. Hungry, angry, lonely, late, and tired. Those circumstances, by my observation and experience, are places where they really drain your regulatory capacity. If you are hungry, which means that you're at a glycemic deficit, your caloric deficit, things like that. If you're angry, if you're lonely, if you're late, and if you're tired, your regulatory capacity is significantly decreased. So being aware of that is what things that stress you. And then on the other side of that is understanding how to mediate those things, understand how to work on my diet, working on my emotional regulation, working on my social connection, working on my scheduling and consistency, working on my sleep habits. That's obviously the counter to each one of the HALT ones. So one of the first strategies that is helpful is certainty anchors. Now, what are certainty anchors? Certainty anchors are the things you do in your day that are just the things you do almost automatically that then decrease your need to make a decision about that specific thing. Now, why do I have a picture of sardines? Well, anybody that works with me knows that I eat sardines basically every day for lunch. Now, why is that? This sounds super gross, but I like them a bunch. Why is that? Because I don't want to worry about what my lunch is going to be every day. I don't want to have to worry about what I'm packing. I don't want to have to worry about what I'm having. I want my lunch to be something that is not taking up any of my mental energy. I don't need a dietary adventure every day at noon. I need calories. So I have a beef jerky or a beef stick, sardines, and some sort of macadamia nut or walnut, whatever it might be, because that's my certainty anchor. And it helps because schedules aren't just for kids at home learning. Schedules take some of the daily guesswork out of things. So that's something to think about. It saves your psychic RAM. It saves the things you have to make decisions on. It saves those kinds of ideas. So look at your day and look at building in those certainty anchors. Are there things like what you eat? Are there things like what time you get up? Are there things like when you lay your clothes out, like the night before? Those are all certainty anchors, which decrease the neurological load, which increases your capacity. Now, another thing I want to mention just real quickly about technology and how like cell phones and things like that come into play is monitoring how much neurological control these things have over you and when they have access to get your attention. I'll give you a quick study real fast. A quick study they did was they had people sit and they set them up to all these monitors and they had them play a game on a computer. Now, they told them they were studying their response to the game, but actually most psychological studies, not most, some of them, they're not telling you the truth. They're studying something completely different. So they had them playing this game. They had them hooked up to all these monitors. And then they put their phone just far enough away to where they couldn't reach it and told them you can't get out of the chair because you'll mess up the test. And then they would text the person. They weren't measuring necessarily the game performance. That was a variable. But what they were measuring is to see what was the change in the person's body when they got a text, but they couldn't look and see what the text was. And they showed their game performance decreased. They triggered the stress response, all these negative things about, oh my gosh, what is that? What is that? And then here's even more interesting. They let them have their phone back, put someone else's phone there, and sent text message to the other person. And they had a similar response to someone else's phone triggering off. So what that means is it makes sense that you should be saying, like, who's in charge? Are the bells and whistles and dings in charge, or are you in charge? So deciding, I will answer email at this time during my day. I will turn off my ringer at this time during the day. Things like that, and how those things work in and how those things are impacted. So exercise, how does that factor in? What does that even mean? So one of the problems with exercise is the idea of people think exercise means you have to go to a CrossFit gym and do 30 muscle ups, pull a hamstring, throw up in a trash can in order for exercise to work. The important thing about exercise is movement. Why is that important? Because those stress hormones that sit in your body, like adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine, all those kinds of things, those are the things that when you exercise, you're flushing that stuff out of your system and delivering nutrients. So when we talk about exercise, what we're saying is the goal of exercise is to get that bad stuff out and get the good stuff in. So it's really, so we talk about exercise with all different versions, but what I tell people is just move. Move. That's the most important thing. Taking the stairs, taking a walk, that is important. Why? It's not just, you take the walk to get rid of the cortisol, to get rid of the extra adrenaline, the stuff that's there when the bear comes along, but when the bear's gone, you don't need it anymore. So you get that stuff out. And if it is exercise, that's, if you do hardcore exercise, that's fine too. The kind of the nice mixture is if you can have the exercise with the social side of it. If you're with your family or with people that it's safe to be with right now, that's important in that. And also psychologically, just another sidebar is the idea that it's the fact that you are making the conscious decision to take the stairs makes you feel like I'm the kind of person that blank. I'm the kind of person that takes the stairs. I'm the kind of person that, and that also, we'll talk about resiliency later, that also counters that learned helplessness. Meditation, I'm not going to spend too much time on meditation. A lot of people think, oh, well, that's some kind of woo-woo thing. Listen, I meditate probably 5 days a week. If I try to get 7 in, it's been very, very helpful. But I'm certain that I'm probably one of the worst meditators in the world. Why? Because my brain is easily distracted. I'm sitting there trying to meditate and think about my breathing and all that. And then I start thinking about squirrels and how I like squirrels and all this kind of stuff. And it's distracting. I use a lot of things to support me. I use an app called the Waking Up app. I've used other apps. What I've found is just making yourself stop, making yourself listen to white noise, set a timer for 5 minutes, reset. What it makes you do is it makes you take control of your neurological functioning or stop your neurological functioning and not be drugged around by technology. Another quick and easy strategy, doing quick chores. Clean. This is a picture of, it's not my garage, it's somebody random's garage. It's why when you straighten up your desk or clean your garage or clean out your junk drawer or clean your closet that has all the stuff in it, it's why that when you finish that, you get this burst of energy. Why? Because it gives you some energy back and also gives you that feeling that your behavior matters. And why you know that works so well is you'll walk by and open that junk drawer or look out in your garage over and over again, because it gives you that feeling of competency, that feeling of capability. Other quick energy management type strategies is we have seen where people that say that money can't buy happiness, that's not necessarily true. It can buy happiness, but they show that the happiness or positive emotion impact comes from investing in experiences. So it's not stuff, but it's experiences. So investing in vacations, and I know that's a tricky thing right now, but investing in things with people have shown to increase the level of positive emotion. Those types of things, going to ball games. That's why this COVID-19 thing can have such a significant impact, because two parts. It affects those shared experiences we have that increase positive emotion, and it takes away our things to look forward to, because those are two things that have been shown to really increase energy, which is investing in experiences with people and having something to look forward to. And that's why you might feel a little bit like you're floating in space. Another great energy management strategy is exercising your signature strength. Doing something that you feel competent at helps to counterbalance. I used to think about this when I write behavior plans for a kid. What I would do is look at their day and have people organize what's this kid good at and what's this kid struggle with. And what I'd find sometimes with kids is they would have 4 things they struggle with right out at the beginning of the day. So they're doing these things, and then their tank is empty by lunch. They flip out, and then they create a huge behavioral issue and get sent home at lunch. Where if we're more thoughtful, we go something the kid's good at, something the kid struggles with, good at, struggles with, good at, struggles with, because we're filling the tank as the tank goes down, filling the tank as the tank goes down. Do that for yourself in a day. Figure out what things drain you, figure out what things fill you up. And if a signature strength side of things, put that in your day. Last but certainly not least, when we talk about energy management, is relationships. Relationships give us our roots. Relationships give us our sense of, they have a healing capacity. I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. But deep social networks are one of our most powerful energy management strategies. Deciding, this is why COVID-19's had such an impact on us, is it's taken some of our who, wins, and wheres. It's taken the ability to go to a church service. It's taken the ability to be at the office with people you like. It's taken the ability to go to happy hour. So what that has done then is it's taken away one of your main energy management strategies or outlets. So figuring out how to do that differently. I know a lot of people have like friend Zoom meetings they're doing. They're doing more intentional family time with like game nights and things like that. All these types of things become critically important, because what happens is these things fill our tanks back up. And that is why, as things start to improve, you are going to see an improvement in our overall mental health as people are around people more. I know the physical health thing becomes challenging, and I'm not going to go down that road too much. And it's more for, when we look at relationships, it's consistency, not intensity. It's the consistency of connection versus the intensity. So it's not the week in Myrtle Beach that's the most powerful. It can be powerful, don't get me wrong. It's the Wednesday night, Friday night, Saturday night. It's eating dinner with your family. It's watching a show with your wife or husband. It's these types of things that have the more long-term positive emotion. And we know that the opposite of the fight or flight response is the calm connect response. So the calm connect response, if fight or flight is about running from the bear, and which is about right here, right now, the calm connect response is about preparing for the future. So preparing for the future and the trigger of oxytocin, what that is your immune functioning is really strong, your digestive system is really strong, reproductive functioning recovers, all these kinds of things as a result of the body's ability to feel safe, calm, and connected. 2 main things that trigger oxytocin in the body. 1 is skin-to-skin contact or physical touch. 2 is intention. So like the ultimate trigger is that hugging someone, right? When interacting with someone at a deep level triggers that oxytocin factor. So, obviously be thoughtful of people that you touch, make sure they're people that want you to touch them. Second of all, intention's powerful. Listening to people, talking to people. Now, last thing we're going to talk about is resiliency development. So It's not good enough to take walks, in my opinion. It's not good enough to have a stress ball. It's not just managing the tank. It's how do you make your tank bigger? How do you make your ability to deal with things? How do you make your capacity to deal with uncertainty and trauma better? So psychologists define resilience as a process of adapting well in face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant source stress. And the last part is it can also involve profound growth. So what we talk about for developing resiliency is increasing the capacity of the tank. That way, it doesn't take one little thing in your drain. Those of you that work with kids, and I know most everybody on here knows, you've got some kids who the slightest bit of adversity drains them completely because their tank capacity is not very large. And this isn't a birth to 3 talk, but if we go back to birth to 3 and start looking at where does the self-regulatory capacity come from, it's from those early relationships, consistent patterns, responses, things like that, that then increase the child's ability to self-regulate, which is what increasing the tank is. So their ability to self-regulate is much larger. For our folks that have what I call the 4 A's, anxiety, autism, ADHD, and ACEs, those are all regulatory issues. And that means commonly their tank is not going to be as large. They're not going to have as large a tank, so they can get depleted more readily because the autism, anxiety, ADHD, and ACEs has a constant kind of drain on their tank. So what we want to do is increase resilience capacity. One of my favorite things when talking about resilience capacity is from Sean Achor when he talks about the Rational Optimist. Now, what is the Rational Optimist? This is not, okay, so some people think of optimism as it's all going to be okay. Well, that's not right. Getting in my car and not putting on my seatbelt, saying it's going to take care of me. The world's going to take care of me for whatever you believe in. I prayed to whatever I believe in, and I don't have to wear a seatbelt because whatever I believe in is going to protect me. Well, that's not right. So, rational optimism is accounting for reality, but also seeing the impact and effect that you can have on that reality, finding your controllables. So we talked about what you can and can't control. The rational optimist is the person that can separate the can and can't control and focus on outcomes on the things they can control. So learned helplessness, as we said before, is this belief that I can't do anything about it. Or rational optimism is that belief that there is something I can do about it. A big part of learned helplessness that you got to be careful of is what your emotional and intellectual diet is. If you're sitting watching 24-hour news about how the world's going to hell in a handbasket, you're going to struggle to develop rational optimism because you're going to be so overwhelmed with information around things you don't have any control over. You're going to have little to no psychological energy left to then use to affect the things you do have control over. And also you got to be careful what kind of people. Now, obviously your exposure to people right now is limited, but the people that you're around that drain your tank, okay, they can push you more into a state of learned helplessness. So that's something to think about. So optimism is not half empty, half full. That's an observation. Optimism, rational optimism, is effort equals outcome. Rational optimism is, I can't control X, Y, and Z in Georgia, California, whatever it might be, the CDC, whoever those people are. But what I can control are these things. And my effort will equal this outcome, washing my hands, whatever it might be, just to be in the COVID mindset. So what my favorite way to refer to this is Lloyd's theory from the great philosopher of the 1990s, Lloyd Christmas. If you haven't seen Dumb and Dumber, you have to. It's a cinematic masterpiece. Right below Gone with the Wind, Dumb and Dumber, right? And at the end of Dumb and Dumber, Lloyd Christmas is sitting with Mary Swanson, who's been standing there talking to Mary Swanson, who he's been following the whole movie. He's in love with her. He wants to declare his love to her, and he asks her, like, what's the chance we're going to end up together? And she says, not good. And then she looks at him, he looks at her and says, like 1 in 100. And she looks back at him and says, more like 1 in 1,000,000. And Lloyd Christmas looks at her and says, so you're telling me there's a chance? So rational optimism is the belief that there's a chance that your effort equals outcome. And the idea of stress equals growth also factors into this, is the idea if it doesn't challenge me, it doesn't change me. So it's not just about trying to reduce the level of stress in my life. It's about meaningfully and purposefully engaging in stress in my life for the purpose of increasing my capacity to self-regulate, increasing my capacity. And I call this bear practice. Remember at the beginning, we talked about running from the bear. So it's, do you run for, this is practice, bear practice. Here are some of the things I'll go through quickly that can be bear practice. Purposeful stress. Exercise is purposeful stress. Let me rewind for just a second. How do we decide what is good stress or bear practice? It's something that is a moderate stressor that is transient, meaning it comes and it goes, and I'm in a safe environment while it happens. So exercise, moderate based on the whole scale of things. Transient, it has a beginning and an end. Safe, if I'm doing it properly, I'm probably not going to hurt myself. There's no wild animals running around trying to kill me while I'm working out, while I'm lifting. So exercise has that element. Why is that purposeful stress so important? The Rational Optimist goes, I have control over this. I did this activity. I had this feeling. Therefore, my behavior matters. Extreme experiences. I'll give you a weird one that I do. In mornings, I do what are called contrast showers. What a contrast shower is, you get in the shower, you have it nice and warm. At one point, you switch it over to as cold as it'll get. You stand in as cold as it'll get for a period of time, and then you switch it back to warm, and then back to cold, and back to warm at different time intervals. And the best way, why is that? I'm not saying you have to do that, but why? What does that do? It is purposefully introducing stress in a moderate, transient, and safe way, which then says, and then in your mind you say, I'm the kind of person that does hard things. Things like that. Hobbies can be purposeful stress. Things that you do that are hard. Puzzles. I play an app called Elevate, which is a mental training app that I play that really pushes me sometimes. It makes me work on things like reading fluency and math fluency that I'm not necessarily as strong at. Trying new things. So do you have good bear practice? What are your bear practice activities that are going to increase your ability to self-regulate? Conscious acts of kindness. These are just some of the research. Probably one of the most important things that I've found that's been a real helpful thing for me in the development of my own resilience and rational optimism is journaling. I'm not someone who really liked to write, really, but I've probably been journaling for probably the last, let's say, like at least 4 to 5 years. And I tell you, journaling's been such an impactful thing. And my general structure for a journal entry is I just write about something. I write about whatever I'm thinking about, whatever I'm feeling guilty about. Maybe it's something I listen to on a podcast. It's an idea I've got some ideas about. And then I go through my day planning for what's called Core 4, which I'll talk about that in just a minute. And then I write 3 things I'm grateful for. And that's something I've kind of quilted in from experience, from research and books that I've read through the years, that format for journaling really works for me. A general kind of free write, to Core 4 planning, and then 3 things that I'm thankful for. And I'll talk a little more about it as it goes. So looking at the dressing, how you're going to address your day and goal setting. And I'm not going to spend too much time on goal setting because I think I want to get more to the nuts and bolts of it. But one thing I do like, and this is from Peterson, is he talks about, and when you're working with kids or families, if you're a clinician or a parent or whatever, and you're trying to help with someone with goal setting, or you want to help yourself with your own goal setting, one of the things I've found that's a really cool thing that Peterson recommends is when you ask somebody about goals or what they'd like to do, you ask them first, like, what's the worst? Like, what do you not want to be? What's the worst that you would want to be? What would a really crappy life look like for you? And then what would a really cool life, or what would an optimal life look like for you? And he talks about getting your fear behind you and getting the light in front of you. And I say some people change because they feel the fire and some people change because they see the light. But what Peterson's talking about is goal setting as positioning those 2 things with you in the middle. So getting the fire behind you, as in like, this is what I don't want, and getting the light in front of you, which is like, this is what I do want. And then figuring out, and this is a great exercise to work through with people, what are the micro routines or small behavior patterns that move a person more toward the fire, and what are the behavior patterns that move people more toward the light? So to somewhat woo-woo about that. But, what does it talk when we talk about this? What are we doing to win the day? When you sit down and say, what does it mean to win the day today? What are the things I need to do? And what are my micro routines? What are the things I need to get right about getting up? My daily routine. And I used to guide me, one of my parts that I've taken this from a book. It's called excuse the profanity, it's called Get Shit Done, but it's by Gadamer, and it's just came out not too long ago. I break my core four, or my things, into three areas. What's a body win today? What's a relationship win today? What's a mind win today? And what's a business win today? And I really have to sit down and think about what winning the day looks like. And that's been a real powerful thing for me. And that's just the way I've organized having Purposeful. Because one of the things we know is the incentive reward system is your brain does best when it feels like it's working towards something. That's why, like, I remember when I finished my doctorate, I had this period of like, now what? Because I'd spent all these years working on this thing that was really engaging and fulfilling. And then when I finished, I had the moment where I took the pictures and all that. And then it was like, now what? So I think there is so much power in deciding what winning the day looks like, and the positive emotional outcome of the striving, the joy of striving, which then feeds that development of resiliency. And it moves beyond, and it makes you move past this admiring problems versus solving problems. So in summary, real fast, and I'll leave time for questions. And I have, as long as people need to ask questions, I'm game. Taking a look at some of the content, rewinding into the idea, do I just talk about stress as if it's this amorphous blob of thing that consumes me? Or do I understand how stress works? Do I identify what parts I have control over versus what I don't have control over? Can I identify how do I know when I'm starting to get stressed? How do I know what things push my buttons? How am I differentiating between controllables and not controllables? How am I looking at my energy management strategies? How am I strategically placing those in my day to know how to get that gas back in my tank? And even more, how am I purposely engaging stress in order to build my resilience capacity to address challenges in my day? So here's the websites for our Behavior and Mental Health Technical Assistance Center. And here's also the website for the Autism Training Center. And you can get to those things. I'll tell you, specific to those of you working with kids and in schools specifically, if you go to our Behavior and Mental Health Technical Assistance Center, we have a Facebook page. We have a YouTube page that we're really populating now. We have a webinar series coming up in June. For our PBIS, we're doing 2 a week for the whole month of June. You can reach out to us. You can go to that Behavioral Mental Health Technical Assistance Center and get more information on that. We already have a bunch of videos we've produced with how to talk about emotions at home, how to build relationships at home, and that's on YouTube if you just go in there and type in WVBMHTAC. And we also have an Autism Training Center Facebook page, YouTube page, all that kind of stuff. I'm so proud to be a part of the ATC and the work that they're doing. So I hope the information I shared with you guys was useful. I'm ready to jump into questions. It's somewhat of an abrupt end, but let's go into some questions.
Okay, I'm gonna open up and see. This is your opportunity right now, if you have any questions, to go ahead and put them in the chat box. I'm seeing most of them are related to CEUs. I have been asked just to remind you guys, if you're having any trouble, to just let us know. Don't worry about it. If for some reason you have trouble with the link, we'll make sure we get you on there. You're going to stay online if you want graduate credit. Jim, somebody is asking if you would mind repeating the 4 micro routines for winning the day.
Oh yeah, it's body, which is what am I going to do physically today? What would it mean to win the day physically? And for me, a lot of times it's some sort of cardio or some sort of lifting or some sort of even stretching or limiting my carbs or whatever it might be. The second one is relationships. And the third one is mind, which is what am I going to do to sharpen my mind today? Reading, journaling, meditate, things like that. And the last one is business. You know, what's ahead of me in business? One thing I do want to mention about that, what that also does for me is there's certain days where I know that it's not going to be, I'm not going to do business. The day's not going to be a big business day. You know, like not today, not obviously, but like a Saturday, I may say to myself, today I'm not going to do anything with business. And I'm giving myself permission beginning of the day to say, today's not a business day. Today's a body day and a relationship day. Today I'm not going to read anything. Or there might be a day where, you know what, today relationships are going to struggle, or I'm not struggle. Today I'm not going to have as much time for relationships because it's a big business day. So it gives you the opportunity to focus, and then give yourself permission that you can't win every one of these things every day. I should have mentioned that.
Okay. And I should have mentioned also that Jim has said that he's going to give permission for us to go ahead and send out his PowerPoint. So if we don't get to all of the questions, some of those will be probably included within the PowerPoint. I'm going to go back here and see if we have any other questions here, because they're filtering in a ton of them at the same time. Sorry, Jim, hang on. They're all filtered in at different times.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. I'm glad I just get to relax now and just answer questions. That's talking to yourself on a computer screen.
It is a little bit bizarre. Does anybody have any other questions that have not been answered? Just lots of thank yous, Jim. Lots of good jobs. Scrolling through, here we go. What is the best way to help your own child deal with stress during this time? It looks like she's referring to like a 16-year-old and an 11-year-old. Do you have any advice to give?
Well, I think first of all, it's getting a sense of where their stress level is. And then I think it's building in those things, building in those energy management things in their day. And that doesn't mean, here's the problem with kids. They're not going to willingly go into some of that stuff sometimes. They're not going to go, you know what, I'm really feeling my neck and my shoulders. I'm kind of stressed out. I think I might go take a walk or whatever. You have to schedule those things. You have to create intentional practices. You have to create time for social connection. Hey, we're going to watch a show here's the problem some people make. They got their kid in there engaged in a Fortnite game, and they bust in the kid's room and say, come on, we're going to watch a show right now, which is a fantastic way to start a fight. What you do is you say, hey, at 8 o'clock tonight, we're going to watch Scoob, I want us everybody to come down and we'll pop some popcorn, whatever that might be. So scheduling those things like the physical activity. Meditation's hard with kids. I use guided imagery more with kids, but most kids aren't going to do that, but some will. Physical activity, if meditation's appropriate, social connection, exercising a signature strength, finding ways to kind of blend that into your daily routine is going to be really important. I will say that technology can have a huge, huge impact on the duration and the stress of, because what happens when they're playing, there are, and I'm not saying don't let your kids play video games, because my kids play video games, but when they're playing, it can trigger that fight or flight because they're in a simulated stress response. So if you stay in that for an extended period of time, that has to, it does, we know, have a neurological and psychological impact. You can tell sometimes if kids play too long, they come out kind of cranky and odd and things like that. So finding ways to pepper in some other things.
Okay, let's see. I see a couple more. I'm just going to go with one more because I saw it a couple of times and I've had this one before too. Do you have any specific advice that you could give somebody who has a child that's experiencing or this could be a child or an adult experiencing a stress crisis like a panic attack? Do you have any quick strategies that you would suggest, or maybe resource directions you could send them in, Jim?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing you understand about a panic attack, and I'm going to speak generally because there's all different kinds of ways that can manifest. The body channel is the first place to start, because what a panic attack is it's perpetuating toward panic, and your body can't go left and right at the same time. So what you want to do, the best thing is to interfere with the body from, let's say right is panic and left is relaxation. So that's why deep breathing is such a powerful technique, because you can't have deep breath. Panic attack goes with shallow breathing and that kind of stuff. So the best thing you have is to use the body's ability to distract from panic. So using things like deep breathing techniques, using things like state breaking, which is like get them in a different spot, change the stimulus, breathing techniques. I've even seen some people where they have like certain mantras they can say to themselves. So really the best thing when panic starts to bring on is that the person has a protocol that they follow, which diverts from the right turn toward panic and makes the body move toward the left turn, which is more of a relaxation state. Now, also I will say it's that thing when I talked about understanding what things trigger panic and then having mediating strategies to prepare for those types of circumstances and situations, because oftentimes panic is connected to a specific situation, circumstance, or reaction. Excuse me. So that's something to think about with that. But body techniques are really, really helpful, and pulling apart previous panic and finding anticipatory strategies is powerful too.
Okay, I'm going to give you one more because I saw it repeated a few times in just different contexts.
Okay.
If you're stuck in your head due to stress, how do you turn it around? So you referred a little bit to it. A couple people had questions about that helplessness portion that you covered. So I'm going to let you end with that one.
Cool.
And then if there are some other lingering questions when I look through you guys, I'll do my best to see if I can get a response and even respond to you directly because I can see your names. So go ahead if you wouldn't mind answering one more, Jim.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'm game. I think when you're stuck, there's this concept of behaving your way into better feelings. And I think if I had to look at being stuck, first of all, you got to look at what you're taking in. You got to look at your emotional and intellectual diet. How much time are you spending ingesting stressful information that you can't do anything about? Chronic news watchers, chronic social media surfing, things like that are going to be things that are going to perpetuate that stuck state because they're going to keep feeding the world's going to hell in a handbasket mentality. So that's the first thing is, monitoring what you're taking in. And then you'll want to start to do some state breaking, which is going to be behaving your way into different things. That's where things like taking a break, exercising. Another big thing that's interesting about state breaking, and this is something Alfred Adler used to talk a lot about, is doing stuff for other people is a fantastic way to get out of your own selfishness. And I'm not saying it to be mean. I'm just saying, like, one of the best ways to get out of your own head, which depressive mindset is very much in your own head, and anxiety is very much in your own head. One of the best ways to get out of that is to have to focus on other people, is to have to focus on helping someone else. Because Adler used to say to people when they would come in there depressed, before you come back, I need you to do 5 good things for 5 different people. And what he was trying to do is to get them out of that internal depressive focus to an external focus. And that can help break you loose psychologically speaking. So looking at what you're ingesting, doing some state breaking stuff with behaving your way into better feelings through exercise, sensory stuff can work for that, stretching, blah, 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 all those kinds of things. And then also looking at how other ways you can get outside your head by focusing on other people.
Wonderful. I will tell you guys, as I've looked through the questions, and there's a lot of them, and knew we wouldn't get to all of them, I can tell you that if you do go ahead and refer to those YouTube pages and resources that Jim shared on his last page, they do actually have some trainings that are already uploaded that do cover some of that content questions you guys are asking with reference to working with children, some specifics on working with children at home who are on the spectrum. So I do suggest that you go and look at some of those links, and I will tell you as a group, we will look through all of those questions. This is the first training series we've put together. We really want it to be relevant to the times and the needs of our community across West Virginia. So we'll look at those questions and make sure that we're tailoring what we do moving forward to providing you the information that you need.